The video quality was surprisingly clear, and when he finished, it was evident he hadn't used protection. That was the final straw for me. My decision was clear: I was done with this marriage. Anything else the team uncovered was just additional evidence to solidify my stance. My private investigator kept me updated regularly, but after that initial week, her destiny was clear, and my choice was made. Starting from the early days of her workshop, I used my time to put my plan into action. I aimed to become a vanishing presence, almost like a ghost. When she returned, I would have disappeared, and there would be no going back, no lies, no ultimatums, no lengthy talks, explanations, justifications, or attempts to mend things. There would only be divorce. My marriage had come to an end. Love doesn't fade quickly, but what's love without trust? A future can't exist with a cheating wife. Some might argue that my solution was feeble. They could suggest she deserves physical punishment, utter embarrassment, and complete destitution. However, in the end, the law would prevent me from pursuing any of that, and I had no intention of ruining the rest of my life by seeking such vindictive revenge on my unfaithful wife and her lover. My revenge would be taking away the one thing she always relied on, the steady presence that supported her, consoled her, uplifted her, and motivated her. I was taking myself away. Frank wasn't a worthy catch. He couldn't provide what she needed long term. Where would a divorced 50-year-old mother find love and emotional stability? I wasn't concerned. She wouldn't be my concern any longer. Every few days, my private investigator would send me more pictures, more videos, and more evidence of betrayal by the person who promised me loyalty above all else. The reports were difficult to read, and the photos and videos were even more painful to watch. The audio recordings were the hardest to bear, especially when they discussed me. He's always texting me about the fish he's catching and how amazing it is up there. He thanks me nearly every day, she said with a laugh. He's clueless. Frank joined in the laughter. Keep him in the dark. Treat him like a mushroom and you're free from his annoyance. He might as well enjoy himself for now. When I return, I'll confront that nerd about his accusations. How dare he keep accusing me of cheating? But you are taking a little break from our marriage, right, beautiful? Or is that another woman sharing my bed every night? She actually giggled at that. What a? Maybe he's onto something, but I won't tolerate it. I'm a writer, damn it, and he's holding me back with his circuits and computer jargon, his millimeters and micro thingamajigs. What does he understand about big ideas? Update 3, I pondered various revenge tactics. I realized that none of those options would truly satisfy me as long as my life remained connected to hers. Only one choice remained, so I began the process of distancing myself from her. I had an open conversation with my boss, explaining everything. He understood, having gone through something similar himself not too long ago. He arranged a transfer for me to our company's office in Portland, Maine. I found the idea appealing. I was familiar with the people there, they were skilled and professional, and I enjoyed their company. The town and the state both appealed to me. I scheduled movers to transport half of the furniture and all my personal belongings up north. I ensured my car was in good shape for the journey. Then, I consulted with a lawyer to initiate the divorce proceedings. As for financial matters, Karen had her own insurance and retirement account. I removed her name from all my assets and made my daughters the beneficiaries. I signed a quitclaim for the house, granting it to her in exchange for no alimony. She would keep her car but needed to handle her own insurance. I planned to handle the bank accounts and credit cards closer to the end, keeping my intentions discreet. From that moment forward, I focused on reinforcing my resolve. What I mean is this: I attempted to call her to inquire about how the workshop was progressing and to express my love. I believed that hearing her lies would strengthen my conviction that my actions were justified. She didn't disappoint. In less than 2 minutes, she answered with enthusiasm, declared her affection, and hurried off to dinner. My private investigator later informed me that Frank was right beside her, exchanging knowing glances and mocking gestures, which only affirmed my decision. It became evident that she treated the situation as a joke, confirming that I was on the right path. Subsequently, I chose to communicate with her through text messages instead of phone calls, as I wasn't sure I could keep my emotions in check over the phone. I would update her about successful fishing trips, but in truth, I sent Jake and his wife on those outings. They had a great time. Jake made a wise choice in his spouse. I did pay them a farewell visit before my departure, and they promised to come see me. As her 6-week workshop drew to a close, I concluded my final tasks. A friend who's a real estate agent gave me a for sale sign to place in the front yard. I couldn't actually sell the house without her consent, especially since I had already transferred ownership to her, but she was unaware of that detail. When she returned home, the sign would be the first thing she noticed. I changed the locks on the house to make it feel less like her residence, selected certain photos from her trip including explicit stills from the video taken beneath Frank's door, and compiled a copy of the PI's report. I left all of this on the dining room table to ensure she was aware that her actions had been uncovered. Most of my belongings had already been moved by the movers, who would store them until I was ready. I only carried 2 suitcases, my briefcase, laptop, and guitar with me. My guitar was a must. I couldn't entrust something so precious to anyone else. While Frank might be involved with my wife, I cherished my guitar deeply. My initial plan was to depart the next morning, knowing she wouldn't return until later that night. This way, I'd be long gone when she arrived. However, I had a change of heart the night before. I wanted her to experience the pain right away, while she could only wait and worry until her return. I sent her an email containing 3 carefully chosen photos of her and Frank along with the words "divorce you. I divorce you. I divorce you." I opted for one photo where they were nearly intimate on the dance floor, clearly showing she wasn't wearing her engagement and wedding rings. The second image captured them walking into his dorm room while holding hands. The third was a screenshot from the dorm room video, showcasing her face clearly. I anticipated she would see these images and hoped it would tarnish her final romantic night with Frank as they frantically searched for cameras that were already removed. Subsequently, I turned off my phone. Leaving the house that had been our family home for countless years was a mix of pain, uncertainty, and newfound freedom. It felt like the most challenging, uncertain, and liberating moment of my life all at once. In essence, my wife was gone from my life. I didn't know the when or the why, but it was as if she had died, even if I hadn't caused it myself. The woman who remained, resembling my wife, was a stranger to me, someone I didn't recognize and didn't wish to reconnect with. I was embarking on a fresh start, facing an unknown path ahead. Amidst the deep sense of loss, there was an odd sense of liberation. The weight of deceit, betrayal, and belittlement was lifted off my shoulders, if only temporarily. The only cost was that half of my life was now inaccessible. Though it was late, my mind was racing, so I drove for about 100 miles along the quiet highway, lost in thought, until I found a hotel for the night. I wasn't looking for a chain hotel, I wanted a genuine local breakfast place. I sought something authentic. Eventually, I found it and savored what could be my last plate of grits for a considerable while. As I savored those grits, my thoughts shifted, and I began to reconsider my journey to Maine. This marked the start of my fresh beginning, and I had a lengthy drive ahead of me. I could speed up my trip to Maine, escaping my problems, but I had a 2-week window before work started. Why hurry? I required time to calm my thoughts, come to grips with her betrayal, and leave the past behind. I chose to take it slow, relishing the scenery during my northbound drive, and engaging with each state and its residents as I passed through. This week would be my transition from my old life to my new one. I intended to pamper my senses, including my taste buds, to cleanse myself of the ugliness and mistakes of my past and get ready for a fresh start. The rest of the day was spent wandering around Williamsburg amidst the summer crowds. I explored the talents of skilled artisans and craftsmen. Despite not having a reservation, I managed to find a place to stay. It wasn't until after a light dinner and settling in for the night that my thoughts returned to my failed marriage. Around that time, she was likely returning home. I wondered how she'd react upon seeing the for sale sign on the front yard and realizing her keys no longer opened the door. The next day, I headed north and drove along the back roads toward Annapolis, Maryland's capital. I passed through small towns and historic plantations along Virginia's ancestral rivers like the York, Rappahannock, and Potomac, which flow into the Chesapeake Bay. There was a single stretch of road ahead leading me toward my future. I would follow that meandering path as it guided me away from betrayal and toward a fresh chapter in my life. Update 4. I sat in my hotel room in downtown Annapolis, and I finally powered on my cell phone. As expected, it was filled with numerous missed calls, emails, and text messages. Most of them were from Karen, while a few came from friends. I read and listened to all of them, even though it was tough. It was a necessary step. Initially, Karen was attempting to convince me that things weren't as they appeared. Yeah, right. Those were the messages she sent from Illinois before she returned home and saw the rest of the photos and read the PI's report. Meanwhile, my friends were informing me that Karen was reaching out to everyone in a bid to locate me. Little did she know, she was looking in all the wrong places. Jake and his wife were aware, but I chose to keep the others in the dark intentionally. I would let them know once I had settled. I was already aware that I couldn't continue being a ghost forever. The 2 calls that got me concerned were from my daughters. Karen had contacted them in an attempt to find out my whereabouts. I had purposely not told them about my decision to leave their mother, as I wanted to do it face to face. However, I couldn't let them worry. So, I spoke with my daughters and calmly explained the situation to them. They were upset and found it hard to believe that their mom could do such a thing, so I sent them the same pictures I had sent Karen the night I left home, along with the PI's report, for them to read. After that, they pledged not to inform their mother about my actions. There was one more missed call. My lawyer informed me that Karen had been officially served with divorce papers. Now she knew I meant business. He also shared that Frank's wife had received a complete set of photos, videos, and audio recordings from his 6-week workshop. That was a dose of karma for Frank. On the 3rd day of my journey, I drove through northern Maryland and with a lot of excitement, I finally reached New Jersey. Well, not exactly. I crossed into New Jersey but didn't stop until I had reached Connecticut. Once in Connecticut, I took a few hours to explore some historic towns along the coast. I didn't have a specific goal, But the architecture was so distinct from what I was used to in North Carolina that I felt a strong sense of being in a new place both physically and emotionally. And don't tell the government, but I spent an hour in Groton trying to spot as many submarines as I could. Those black fish are quite stealthy. While gazing along the shore, I was reminded that when they refuel those nuclear submarines, they cut a hole in the hull to refuel the reactor and then weld the hull back together. Was that a metaphor for my situation? Could Karen's betrayal, which tore a hole in my heart, be the first step in re-energizing my life? Could I heal myself once I embarked on my new journey? As I woke up the next day, I knew it would be the most challenging day so far. After a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, toast, and a strong cup of black coffee, I braced myself for a difficult conversation with my eldest daughter, Claire, in Brown. The drive there didn't take long, and I arrived at her dorm around late morning. We decided to delay our conversation a bit so that she could pretend to be cheerful for an hour or two. She showed me around the campus and then took me to the cafeteria, where she introduced me to her friends. They were exactly the kind of young men and women I had hoped she would be surrounded by. They were friendly, attentive, and seemed to provide mutual support. On our way out, I took Claire's roommate aside and informed her that Claire was going to have a tough day. I asked her to look after my daughter. She replied, "Of course, Mr. Baker. She shared with us last night. We're all here for her." Yes. My daughter had chosen her friends wisely. Claire and I spent hours in her dorm room, having a long conversation. I shared with her photographs and played audio recordings that I never expected to share with one of my children. Her emotions shifted between sadness and anger. "I can't believe Mom would do that. Is she even the same person who raised us? What kind of disgusting person has she turned into?" I had to intervene at that point, even though I understood her sentiment. "Claire, regardless of what she's done, she's still your mother. And remember, it's me she's betrayed, not you." "Sorry, Dad, but she shattered my only family. This is absolutely affecting me." I couldn't dispute that. Throughout the afternoon, we continued our conversation, and I outlined my plans to her. I encouraged her to gather her friends, and we went out for dinner at the best place in town, or at least the best within my budget. It seemed like everyone enjoyed a break from the usual dining hall food. I shared stories of my own college dining experiences, and I think it gave them a newfound appreciation for their current situation. I stayed at a local hotel that night, and the next morning, I had breakfast with Claire, held her in a tearful hug, and then headed north to Boston to repeat the process. Claire must have informed Denise, as her reaction was much more composed than her older sister's. There was still disappointment and anger, but less surprise. She requested to see the evidence, and I showed her. Coincidentally, her mother called while we were talking, and I gave her the universal sign for "No, I'm not here." I shook my head, gestured frantically, and mimicked a throat-cutting motion. She understood. Denise was always the more level-headed one in the family. Then she did something I thought I'd never witness. She said, "Dad called last night, didn't he? Is it true you've become a woman who cheats on her husband and lies about it, becoming involved with multiple partners?" I was taken aback. I wanted to scold her for speaking to her mother like that, but at the same time, I couldn't deny the truth in her words. "You heard me, Mom. You spent 6 weeks being involved with someone else while Dad was alone at home. Was it worth it, Mom? Was it worth losing your marriage over?" Wow, my daughter has quite the way with words. Note to self, don't get on her bad side. There wasn't much more to discuss. Denise informed me that her mother was mostly in tears and attempting to offer excuses, but my daughter wasn't buying any of it. Later, I took Denise and her friends to a Thai restaurant called the Elephant Walk, not far from campus. Just like her sister, Denise had chosen her friends wisely, and dinner was a pleasant affair. On our way back to campus, one of her friends said, "Mr. Baker, Denise told us about what you're going through. She was really upset last night, but we supported her. Maybe you could visit us again and we'll treat you to the cafeteria." That elicited laughter from the group. I mean, well, actually, maybe we can find a better place than that. This sparked more giggles, and we laughed all the way back to her dorm. I found a place to stay for the night, had breakfast with my daughter in the morning, and on the 7th day of my journey, I continued heading north. I departed Boston and found myself just 2 hours south of Portland. My focus had shifted from my soon-to-be ex-wife to my daughters. They were growing into strong, principled young women, and I couldn't be prouder of them. I now realized they would navigate the upcoming divorce better than I had anticipated. The challenge on this day was leaving these two amazing gems behind, with no certainty of when I'd see them again. As it turned out, my worries were unnecessary. I wasn't prepared to confront the reality of starting my new life just yet. So, when I reached Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I turned west and drove towards the White Mountains and the Presidential Range. I entered the White Mountains and took the Cog Railway up to the summit of Mount Washington. Standing there, gazing across the expanse to the smaller peaks of the White Mountains and surveying the green pine forests below, feeling the cold Arctic winds that seemed out of place in the early days of August, I finally sensed a rebirth within myself. I was alone, but at last, I was standing tall. I had gone through a transformation, leaving behind the challenges and regrets of my old life, And now I was ready to embrace the new chapter and all its potential. I stood on higher ground, prepared to embark on a fresh journey. Everything I desired lay ahead. The next morning, I ordered a plate of pancakes topped with real maple syrup. I was in maple syrup country now, and that would be the case for years to come. Feeling rested and eager, I got back into my car and drove to Portland. I arrived in the mid-afternoon, so I decided to touch base with my new boss to let them know I had made it. I was already acquainted with about half of the office staff, and I received a warm welcome. It felt reassuring. They were the first cheerful, uncomplicated faces I had encountered in a week. My new boss, Henry, gathered the office for introductions. I had a quick tour of the workplace, but not before everyone agreed on where we would all go for dinner. I assumed it would be a downtown restaurant, but to my surprise, we ended up at Henry's house, grilling steaks and enjoying all the accompaniments. I know, I should have savored lobster in Maine, but there was no rush for that. This was more about reintegrating into society. While enjoying some exceptionally good steaks and truly outstanding local beer, they inquired about my story. What was a guy from the South doing, uprooting his life and moving to Maine at this stage? So, I shared my tale. I omitted the graphic details but provided enough for them to understand. I concluded with a small request: I might get a bit short-tempered in the next few weeks. It's not my usual demeanor, but I have a lot to process. I hope that if I act out, you'll call me out and tell me to cool it. I could use some gentle pushback now and then. Unexpectedly, every woman there hugged me and gave me a peck on the cheek, while every man put an arm around my shoulder. "We're here for you, Ab." That's all they said and all they needed to say. Later that night, as I settled into my hotel room, I powered up my cell phone once again. Both of my daughters had sent supportive texts. They must have shared my number with their friends, because I had received about 8 or 10 additional texts from the young men and women who appreciated the dinner and wanted me to know they'd be there for my daughters. Those kids are truly wonderful. A number of friends continued reaching out, so I made the decision to connect with all of them and explain the situation so they could stop fretting. I didn't reveal my location, that would come later. I simply told them why I had left. Despite their initial reluctance to believe, I sent them the same 3 photos I'd sent Karen and informed them that I had even more incriminating evidence if they needed further convincing. I pondered it, but honestly, I couldn't find a single reason to shield her from her own choices. I had tried, and it hadn't worked. So, let the truth come out. In due time, I received messages of love and support from each of them, and I assured them I would stay in touch. It was becoming increasingly apparent that my notions of becoming a ghost were just wishful thinking. Too many people cared about me, and that's certainly a positive thing. I went through the remaining text messages from Karen and listened to the missed calls. Eventually, she came clean and confessed, though her confession was mixed with strange bursts of anger. She managed to blame me one way or another for her actions and for everything that had unfolded. Well, that's just ridiculous. I sent her a text saying I'd call her the next day around noon. It had to happen sooner or later. Let's just say the conversation was far from satisfying. She swung between blame, guilt, and denial. She was sorry. Frank's influence was strong over her. I was suffocating her. It was my fault because I worked too much. She even had the audacity to claim that nothing serious happened between them, they were just messing around. I almost burst out laughing when she tried to convince me she was only searching for her creative inspiration. She went so far as to accuse me of turning our daughters against her, as if her own actions hadn't accomplished that without any assistance from me. When she finally fell silent, I laid it out for her in a straightforward manner. She had conspired with Frank to betray me, resisted my efforts to salvage our relationship, carried out the betrayal, and now she was facing the consequences. I no longer cared about the whys. When I hung up, she was still crying and pleading her case. I was done with her. There was no turning back. I knew too much. I located a simple yet comfortable 2-bedroom apartment in an older building, conveniently close to the office. I thought I could use the exercise from walking and initially considered it a temporary arrangement, but my perspective quickly shifted. Living simply in town, avoiding the extra responsibilities that come with owning a house, and having a small coastal cottage for weekends seemed like a good plan. Then I thought, why stop at a cottage? I could get a boat, keep it docked in the harbor, and that could be my seaside retreat. By the time I sorted all of this out, it was early fall. I thought I'd lead a solitary life, but it hasn't turned out that way. I actually spend more time with my daughters now than when I lived in Raleigh. They come up for a weekend every month, often bringing friends along. During those 36 hours, my apartment buzzes with activity, and I usually treat them to dinner. Once they're gone, I do crave the quiet, although I miss them as soon as they leave. Surprisingly, a few of my friends have visited, and the rest plan to come when the weather's better. I'm living alone, but I don't feel lonely. I've made new friends at work and through my adventures. The sailing community is lively and inclusive, and I've met intriguing women. However, I'll stay respectful and well-behaved until the divorce is finalized. Even though the divorce will be official soon, Karen still reaches out to me. She never truly repents and prefers to downplay the situation. All she says is, everyone does it. It doesn't mean anything. But it does. The intimacy carries weight, and the deceit and manipulation matter even more. I thought about explaining this to her, but people change, and I no longer see the point. Truthfully, my life isn't fully separate from hers. With 2 daughters and many mutual friends, complete detachment is unlikely. Nevertheless, with 600 miles between us, I no longer live with the daily pain of rejection and betrayal. She used to be the center of my life until I was no longer in hers. Now, I'm forging my own path and creating my own future. Several positive outcomes emerged from this situation. To begin with, I genuinely enjoy living up here. I'm going through my first Maine winter, which is a bit of a shock, but if others can handle it, so can I. The early darkness in this region actually makes indoor gatherings feel cozier and brighter. I've started searching for a boat and found a place with moorings not too far from town. So, I'm looking forward to spring when I can work on splicing lines and applying varnish. The local restaurants are good, the microbreweries are fantastic, and the people are authentic. There's a variety of music, dances to learn like contra dancing, and I'm still discovering surprises. I believe life will turn out well for me after all. Is my heart fully healed? Not yet, but time has its way of healing wounds, and I'm confident in the better life that lies ahead. Oh, and as a side note, Frank's wife seems to be as old-fashioned as I am. She kicked him out of the house and divorced him. What's even worse, both Karen and Frank are still unpublished.